Today's conversation is sponsored by First Generation Capital Partners. If you're an accredited investor and you want to know about how we're helping other accredited investors keep more of their income, go to firstgencp.com/going long.
We are our investors are us, right? And so it's how can we help our community, people that resonate with who we are, whether it's age, whether it's education, whether it's financial status, whether it's actual ethnic background, right? It's how can we help our communities.
You're listening to the Going Long podcast with Billy Keels, the #1 podcast for long-distance real asset investing.
Welcome to the Going Long podcast. We're back once again to continue to help to educate you so that you feel much more comfortable as well as confident investing beyond your backyard. And yes, I am your host, Billy Keels, and I am super excited to welcome you back to another amazing conversation. Today's guest absolutely crushes it. You're going to get so much out of this, especially if you're a first-time long-distance investor. If you're a millennial, definitely you're going to love this conversation. So that being stated, listen. The podcast continues to move up the charts. I can't thank you enough for continuing to download, for continuing to share the podcast. And for those of you who have already left your honest written review as well as rating, thank you so much. It makes a major impact. And if you continue to think about it, go ahead and leave that honest written review as well as rating on the Apple Podcast platform. We've even included a little link that you can just click and it will show you exactly how to do that. And we appreciate it because all of your feedback is what continues to help us attract amazing guests that give you the content that you absolutely need, that's going to help you move forward faster. And hopefully you are also enjoying the changes that we've been making here recently. So also, if you want to check out any of the previous episodes, just go to firstgencp.com/podcast. You can find all the episodes, transcripts, video, audio, everything that you would ever want to know. firstgencp.com/podcasts, and you can find everything. As for today, like I said, if you are a millennial, if you are looking for how you can work successfully with your spouse, if you're a first-time investor who's looking to go long distance, today's conversation with our guest is going to really help you understand how to make it rain, literally make it rain in your long distance investing success. We're going to get to that conversation with Daisy Serrano, which will be just after this. Are you a busy, high-paid professional? Someone that in the previous 2 years has earned $200,000 and is expected to earn $200,000 this year? Or maybe if you filed jointly, previously you've earned $300,000 the previous 2 years and you're also expected to do that this year. Or maybe if not, either individually or jointly, you have $1 million in net worth, not including your primary residence. If you meet any of these criteria, then you're someone that the IRS considers to be an accredited investor. That probably means you're someone like an enterprise software sales executive. You may be an executive in a major corporation. You may be a doctor. You may be a lawyer, maybe a high-paid consultant. You may even work for a major sports franchise. The thing I know you have in common is that you continue to do the hard work. Like you're doing 100% of the work and you're only bringing home 50% of the reward because you continue to get crushed by your income taxes. If you are tired of this situation and you're looking for a new solution, then go to firstgencp.com/going long. When you get there, that's going to help you to start the journey so that you can begin to take back control of your taxes, take control of your time. And then also that means you're going to be able to spend more of the time that you want with the people that you love the most. And that is the way that you're going to get the personal freedom that you're looking for. So if you're looking to take back control, go ahead and go to firstgencp.com/going long and see how we can help you today. So if you want to understand how millennials can find the path to make it rain to successful outcomes in long distance investing, then guess what? Today's the conversation that you're going to want to listen to until the very last word. You know why? Well, because today's guest not only started her career as a study abroad specialist. I really want to hear more about that because this whole study abroad thing is very, very cool. She's also held various roles in academia related to international education. That's really rings lots and lots of bells for many people here. She also served as an executive assistant in international programs at UC Irvine. She also had the opportunity to work in the consulate general for the state of Kuwait. That really, really sounds interesting. And most recently is the managing partner of Make It Rain Capital and also the co-host of the extremely popular podcast, Make It Rain, Multifamily Real Estate Investing for Millennials. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to today's conversation, Daisy Serrano. Daisy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Billy. Such an honor to be with you. I know that we've had you on our show. My husband's been with you as well. So I'm excited and thrilled to share my story with your audience today.
You know what? I cannot wait for everybody to learn so much from you and the great things that you're doing. And yes, you know what? If you want to check out Luke was on conversation number 88 of the Going Long podcast. He was absolutely phenomenal. He was there in the very, very beginning. So we appreciate that. And then you can check me out at the Make It Rain podcast in episode 132. So since you brought it up, I figured we should talk about it and everybody can know. And as they listen to this conversation, they're going to also hear the other half of the dynamic duo of Make It Rain Capital. So Daisy, I really would love for the Going Long family to get to know you. So we're going to ask you question number one, which is help us understand, where is it that you live in the U.S.?
Yeah, I was actually born and raised in a very small town in California, in Victorville, Southern California for that matter. And as of a year and a half, we relocated to Austin, Texas. So now we're here in the good state of Texas.
Fantastic. And that seems to be like a trend lately. A lot of people from California moving to Texas. Is that because you all went there? Is that what that's all about?
We started it all. Don't listen to anybody else.
Fantastic. Well, listen, on question number two really has a lot to do with positivity. So I would love for you to share with me and the Going Long family, what's the most positive thing that's happened to you in the last 24 hours?
Yeah, the most positive thing is it's quite personal at this point. I am a month and a half out from having our first baby. And so every morning I do meditation and affirmations around the birth of our baby. And so that always just gets me going and gives me the energy to hit the world running, right? And to be a good example for our future baby.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you sharing that with us. And yes, in the next month and a half, I'm sure things are going to continue to go well and continue to have these affirmations and be able to start that day with positivity. So thanks so much for sharing that, Daisy. And, and I know you and I know one another, and you probably recognize it every once in a while. I try to keep the bar, like I set it really, really high. Sometimes I set it so high that I set goals for myself that are impossible. Like trying to tell your entire backstory. I tried to tell your backstory in like 1 minute or 1 second and 1.5 seconds. Never was going to happen. You've done way too much. You've impacted way too many lives. So sorry for trying to do that. But more importantly, I really, really hope that you can help me out by you telling your backstory in your own words, and you can take as much time as you need. And also along the way, Daisy, if you could help us by talking to us about some of the major decisions that you've made to get to this point in your journey, and then we'll see where you and I take the conversation from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I, was born and raised in California to immigrant parents from Mexico. So that is a big part of my upbringing, right? Was taught that you grow up, you go to school, right? You get a good paying job. So that's exactly what I did, right? I went off and, studied criminology for school. I wanted to work in juvenile detention centers. Very quickly realized that it was very hard emotionally to separate myself from the kids that I was working with, and pivoted into education shortly after graduating from college. And I was in education actually for about 10 years, right? Doing different roles. You mentioned study abroad, working for the consulate, working for colleges and universities, language centers. And I absolutely loved that industry, Billy. I never really thought I would leave, right? It was such an impact based and purpose driven industry, I would say. And so a lot of that teaching now has transferred into what we do with real estate. The pivot, right? The reason for that change in big part was, you mentioned my husband, Luke, who was in your podcast before. He came and introduced this whole world of real estate to me. And I had no idea. I didn't know anybody who had ever invested, right? My parents had bought a single family home when I was young. But that was it, right? That was my exposure to investing. It was to accomplish the American dream, which my parents have done in different ways. And so that was it, right? That's where it stopped. And so here comes Luke into my life talking about investing and, out of state, looking at investing out of state. For a lot of your audience, it's out of the country. Out of the country and out of state was the same for me at that point, right? It just felt very, very far. So started learning more about it, was very bored by the numbers side of things. I'm much more of a people person, right? Very social. My husband is much more interested in analytics and the numbers behind things. And so, we started learning together. And in that process, I realized that real estate could give me the opportunity to help retire my parents. And that was my aha moment. That was when the light turned for me. And I realized that it wasn't just about myself. It was about how I could leverage real estate to help my family, my parents, my community, to be a good example, right, for my nieces and nephew, to be able to expose them to this world that I have not been exposed to at all. And so sort of combine all of that together. And Luke and I realized that a lot of our work in real estate, if we were going to do this, we started investing passively, got a little bit of the bug, right? Never thought we would be on the active side. That really came in time. And in time, we met so many amazing people, and others kept telling us, why don't you do this? Why don't you jump onto the active side? And we were like, no, we have enough going on, right? That's not something that we were focused on or interested in. Eventually it did, right? All of those seeds that have been planted grew. And so we decided, okay, we want to do this for ourselves. And that was really us sitting down and looking at the next 10 years of our lives and planning out what's the kind of life that we want to have once we're married, once we have children, and so all of that came back to real estate, and it always came back to moving to Texas because that was the market that we'd been investing in, right? We never invested in California. We never bought a home in California. And so everything just came back to needing to make that move. And so we did. We got married. 3 months later, we moved to Austin without knowing absolutely anybody here, right? It was definitely a leap of faith in so many ways. Of course, had done our homework and looked at the markets, looked at, where we wanted to live. But in so many ways, you take action, you do and follow your heart, and everything else kind of works out from there, right? I wholeheartedly believe that. And so now we're here in Austin. We are providing investing opportunities for our investors. We're very hyper-focused on education and on providing access to people who wouldn't traditionally have access to these kind of investment opportunities. So part of our mission is to create access for more millennials. We'd love to see more young people like ourselves in this industry and know that you don't have to wait until you're older to start. And on the other side of that is also to provide access for first-time investors, right? Across all ages and all industries and all parts of the country. And so that's what we do now, right? We have a podcast, we have networking opportunities and a lot of other things going on. And it's all focused on giving back and creating a community of people around us that are growth-minded, that are looking to help others as well and always do the right thing.
And so having that focus on being able to impact others, help others, do the right thing. And by the way, your podcast is a pretty awesome podcast, by the way. It's an awesome podcast. And I love the focus around being able to help both millennials as well as first-time investors and being able to do that in a strong base of education. And so you talked a lot about, you helped us get to know more about you. There are a couple of things that really resonated that I was hoping you could talk to us a little bit more. And I guess the main one is, you talked about out of country, out of state. It's pretty much the same. But one of the things that happens is it's very contrarian, Daisy. Hopefully you would agree, because most people tell you like that you need to buy in the same place that you live. And so you made the decision to, two things are really interesting because I think a lot of people have a similar kind of feeling, and I'd love for you to maybe walk us through what your process was. Number one, you mentioned that you weren't really even exposed to real estate. I'd never been exposed to real estate. Luke is the one that talked to you about it. So one, you were dealing with something that you didn't necessarily know about, first of all. And then secondly, if I understood you correctly, you were in California and you invest in an asset, and whether it's active or passive, you're still investing in something that you can't walk down the street and see. And so maybe you could talk to us about what that was like for you to invest in some type of an asset that you hadn't been exposed to growing up. And then it's completely contrarian because you're not even investing in something that's in your backyard. It's literally like thousands of miles away. Talk us through that, please.
Yeah, absolutely. People thought I was crazy, right? When I first brought it up, right? Investing out of state. For us, it was definitely a route of education, of learning more about the industry before we invested, right? There was quite a bit of learning, reading books, listening to podcasts. I was hooked. I would listen to podcasts every day, on the way to work, on the way home, right? And full circle, right? I got the opportunity to go onto that one of those podcasts years later. And it was just a blast to be able to now share that experience with others. But there was a pretty steep educational journey, I would say, to learn more about the industry and be as informed as we could, right, prior to investing. But even then, Luke, he was sold on it significantly sooner than I was. And so he actually invested in a deal on his own first. And once I saw the distributions coming in, the business plan being executed, that's really what gave me a lot more confidence to say, okay, this is real, right? And the other thing that we did is that we also flew out to the market to visit and secret shop the properties and get to know the area. And there were all these, growth factors, right, that we saw when we did our research online, which you can do from anywhere in the world. That's the beauty of it. Yep. But we also wanted to get that tactile feeling of, is this really what's going on in this specific submarket? And so there was definitely a financial investment, right, in going out to traveling, right, from California to Texas to really scope out the market and the properties. But it was definitely worth it because it just gave us much more confidence in talking to, taxi drivers and going to a lot of the different parts of town that were experiencing growth. And this was in San Antonio, Texas, is where the property was located. Mm-hmm. And so once we experienced it for ourselves and we had the research and the backup of, all the growth that was happening in that state, it gave us a lot more confidence, but it definitely took a while. And I would say for myself, even the first time that I invested passively, I remember very vividly wiring that money and kind of holding my breath for a second, right? Because there is a level of trust, right, that you have to have in the sponsor. And even if you know them and, you've had conversations, it's still your hard-earned money that you've worked for so long to be able to now invest. There's a sense of empowerment. For me, there was, at least when I sent in that wire, but there was also a sense of fear, right? There's a possibility that this will not come back. But ultimately the fear didn't outweigh the empowerment and, the opportunity that was there. And so we moved forward and now here we are, right? A couple investments in, being now on the active side. And it's been a great experience because now I can help first-time investors because I understand and I went through that process myself. So it gives me a lot of understanding and empathy when speaking to them and understanding the journey that they're on.
Yeah, having that understanding of someone's journey because you've already been on that journey, it makes it so much more powerful when you can actually speak to that feeling of thrill or that feeling of fear because you've been there yourself. And to the point that you're making, I mean, there's nothing like that very first time when you make the wire transfer, you go, oh my gosh, hang on a second. Because what that represents, aside from the trust, it's always, it represents time, right? Because you worked really, really hard to be able to accumulate those financial assets, meaning the money. And so you want that money to multiply because you're buying future time. And if that goes away, then that means that you're going to have to go and work more hours doing something else, take more risk to try and return that. So there's a lot to be stated for having gone through that once. And even if you've gone through it many, many, many more times, every single time that you kind of push that or give the order to make the wire transfer, there's a lot that goes behind that because ultimately it is about an asset that it is time, and you can, if you do it properly, you can buy yourself time in the future. But once that time is gone, it's pretty much gone. So I appreciate you sharing that, Daisy, because that's something that is, it's really, really helpful to gain insight. And you mentioned earlier too, as you have this focus on first-time investors, millennials, you've gone through it, but you could have made any choice of person to focus on, right? And I know you're in the millennial generation, but why did you make the decision specifically to niche down and to really help millennials and first-time investors. You talked about those are the investors that you wanted to be able to help, but maybe you could help us understand a little bit about the why behind that.
Yeah, Luke and I have this internal saying that we always say to each other with regards to Make It Rain, which is we are our investors are us, right? And so it's how can we help our community, people that resonate with who we are, whether it's age, whether it's education, whether it's financial, status, whether it's, our actual ethnic background, right? It's how can we help our communities? And so that translates directly into both of us being first-time investors and going through that process, right? And to both of us being millennials. And a lot of it on the millennial side, Billy, if I'm completely honest, it happened by accident, right? We started going to a lot of local meetups, a lot of conferences, and that's networking is huge in our industry, as you know. And so we started going to a lot of these events, and we saw that there weren't very many young people. We were few of any, at that time, right, when we started 4 years ago. And we started asking ourselves why that is. And the more we started talking to our friends and our family, we realized that it was because a lot of young people didn't know that this was something that was possible, right? And maybe at that age of our lives, they also weren't thinking that far ahead to retirement, right? Or to being able to create a life of your own, right? And live life according to your own terms. And so we just started having more conversations with people around us. And it was actually our community that gave us the name of Make It Rain. I don't know if Luke mentioned, but, we decided at some point, right, we created our 10-year plan. We decided this is what we wanted to do. And then we said, who are we, right? What are we going to call ourselves? What are we going to represent? And we wanted to represent millennials because everybody mentioned our age, right, when they would meet us. And so we said, you know what, we're going to turn this quality into a strength and into a representation of who we are and our brand, right? And so we did. And we asked our community, these are the different names that we're thinking, like, what do you all think? And our friends and our community and our family chose Make It Rain. And so it's sort of a full circle, right? Because they made us who we are. And so we represent them and always look to help them as well.
Love that, because it brings it full circle to we are our investors and our investors are us. And so being able to get that direct input and that direct impact from the communities that you are serving is something that is fantastic. I think it is a matter of being able to not only say something, but you're actually doing what you say. And there's nothing better than that. Trusting that you're enjoying today's conversation. And you know what? If you're tired of getting crushed by taxes and you're looking for greater freedom to be able to choose what you want to do when you want to do it, make sure that you go to firstgencp.com/going long and see how we can help you today. Let's get back to the conversation. We kind of joked about it in the beginning, Daisy, but when you and Luke decided to start the trend of having Californians leave California and move to Texas, it wasn't very popular at the time, but it's something that you all decided to do. And I'd love for you to maybe unpack some of the reason for that, because once we get you to Austin, there's some things that I know that you all are doing that are very specific to, that ties back to what you were doing before. But sometimes people are afraid to actually move from one location to the other. And I would be interested in you maybe sharing, I guess, whatever the facet that's the most relevant to our conversation today on making that geographical location, that change of geographical location from California to Texas.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a big part of the focus for us is that we knew the Texas market, right? We had been investing in the Texas market for a few years, and we knew the potential that was here as well. And so even though we didn't have a network built up, we didn't know a lot of people right after we got married. Instead of going on a honeymoon, it was right in the middle of COVID. And so we called it our business moon, and we came to Texas instead for a week. And we just met with as many people as would meet with us, right? That we had met on online virtual meetups and, introductions and you name it, right? And so we were really focused on how can we make the most out of our move before we even move there, right? And establish those connections. And so we were very intentional about that. And even after that trip, we continued following up. We had planned this move for about a year and a half. So by the time it came, we had been ready mentally. We had been preparing our family, right, to know that we were going to make this move. And so once we moved to Austin, we really hit the ground running. And 1 month in, we started a meetup here. And that was in part, to get to know, right, the investing community here, sponsors, other operators, vendors, brokers, investors, but also it was a bit of a personal, influence, right, to be able to literally get to know people and have a community around us. And so we always focused in on that, on community, on how can we bring other people together. And the other side of it that was crucial for us, Billy, is that we had been underwriting deals since we were still in California, right? Mm-hmm. That's something that, I mentioned earlier, my husband's very analytical, so he oversees the acquisition piece. So we'd been underwriting deals, but not being able to get in front of those brokers had made a very big difference in terms of getting LOI submitted and moved forward, right?
Yeah. And so when you're able to take the vision of where you all wanted to be, you recognize that California wasn't that place. You wanted to get closer so that you could start to build more relationships. And it was basically in spite of, you had every excuse in the world to not go. It was during COVID. It was this, it was that. And you all decided that your vision was big enough, your why was big enough to actually be there. Not only did you get there, not knowing anyone, you started to build a community. One of the things that I think is interesting, you start seeing results. So you were going through and creating your business cases, or you're underwriting your properties, and you weren't getting your LOIs submitted as much. How much of an impact did that have on your LOIs being submitted once you started getting to know the brokers face to face?
It took some time, right, to get out there, meet the brokers, tour properties. You have to do so much of that to really, have brokers take you seriously, right? Particularly when you don't have any active deals behind you. You don't have a track record. And so for us, a big part of it was hitting the ground running, right? Doing all of these networking events, meeting people in person, really putting a team together, right, to say, who do we want to work with and who's behind us? Even if we don't have the experience ourselves, who is the team that brings that track record? So that was pivotal, Billy. We for sure, we talk about this all the time now, that we wouldn't have been able to close on our first deal, which happened 5 months later after we moved here, without having moved to the market. And yes, it was a huge sacrifice, not being close to our family and so many different things, right? But the progress that we've been able to make now, we have now two deals since we've moved out here. And, that wouldn't have happened to the same extent had we not made the move. And so it's just really reconfirmed, right, that this is the right thing, that what we needed to do. And all of it came back to a very strategic conversation that Luke and I had before moving. And we looked at, okay, people that are successful in this business, what are those qualities and actions that they've taken to be successful? And we saw that everybody had a really strong boots on the ground team in their local market. And so for us, the option was either we partner with somebody who has very strong boots on the market or boots on the ground and understands the market, or we become that person in that group ourselves. And we decided for the latter, right? Which is what prompted this whole move. And so, that's been definitely pivotal right now. We have strong relationships with operators across the country, and we are the boots on the ground. We understand this market, and we are out there touring properties, talking to brokers, meeting with other operators. And that's been fundamental for us.
And I think that's absolutely fantastic. And so once again, it's having your vision, taking your action, and beginning to get results. And so as you begin to gain traction, the more traction you gain, the more people that you can serve, and the more people that you are serving in a positive fashion, then it just becomes a really kind of a positive snowball effect, which I think is absolutely fantastic. Now, also too, and I know you and Luke put a lot of time and focus, and you've done a lot of the upfront work, but sometimes it can be a challenge, right, to work with your spouse. And so people thinking about, hey, listen, I want to talk about this investment opportunity where maybe my spouse thinks about it, I don't think about it, I want to stay in this particular kind of asset class. Talk to us about what you found to be some of the keys to success for being able to maintain a positive emotional relationship as well as a positive professional relationship with your spouse.
Yeah, that was definitely a learning journey, right? Along the way, I think when we first started working together, it was when we launched the podcast, and we have very different working styles, right? I had been working for years, he'd been working for years, but we'd never worked together, and that can be completely different. So, Luke is about getting things done. He's go, go, go. For me, it takes me a little bit longer. And so at one point, we hadn't even launched the podcast yet, Billy, and we were clashing, right? We were just not communicating. We didn't know how to work together. And so I said, you know what, maybe this whole thing is not going to work out. Yeah. Let's reconsider. And we did, right? We reconsidered. We looked at, okay, what are your strengths? What are my strengths? How can we communicate just professionally, right? Outside of communicating on the personal side, we had that, I think, on lockdown, and we had done really great progress, right? Getting to know each other on a personal level. And so a lot of it just came down to understanding each other professionally, how we each work, what are our strengths. And then once we did that, then allowing the person to run with whatever they're overseeing, right? So whatever Luke oversees now on the acquisition side, that's his department completely, right? I run investor relations, I run marketing, I run a few other parts of the operation, and that's my, department, right? Completely. And so if I need help or support from him, then I'll ask for it, right? If he needs help and support from me, then he'll ask for it. And so we work very well in tandem now and support each other, but we each have our responsibilities, and that person is solely responsible for that. And we trust that the other person has the strength and the skill set to be able to execute on that, right? So we have a meeting every Sunday, both on the personal side, where we talk about, our goals and our finances. And we've been doing this since before we even got married, when we were still dating. And then we also have a Make It Rain meeting every Sunday, where we look at, our KPIs and our goals and what each of us is working on. So that helps us just to stay on track and to be able to support each other, right? And say, okay, this is what you have going on this week. Maybe I'll stop on the investor relations piece for this week, and I can jump in and help you with X, Y, and Z, right? Particularly when we're in acquisition mode, then my time goes towards acquisition mode. If we're in capital raising mode, then his time goes towards capital raising to support me. So it's just been figuring things out along the way. And now I would say that we confidently, right, know and understand our own strengths and departments so well that we can support each other even more.
Yeah. And when you find that way to be able to support one another even more, and sometimes that's through trial and error, and sometimes you get it right the first time, which usually doesn't happen. But what I love about what you just said, Daisy, is it's about the question that you ask. And the question is, how can we better communicate? And so when you approach it from that type of perspective, it's no wonder that you improved your communication, because you're figuring out, how do we actually get to this point? And then from there, what you both have realized is that it's about being able to stay in your lane, so to speak, and be able to leverage your strengths. You talked about in the very beginning that Luke is very much more of an analytical kind of underwriter, and you're much more of the person who is public relations and the community builder per se. And so being able to work in your sweet spot every day is fantastic. Having a more open lines of communication, more transparent lines of communication, also allows you to get the things out that you need to get out, so that ultimately you can move forward both professionally as well as personally. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And you know what? It's almost time. It's almost time to go to the Going Long final three. But I want to ask you one other question, which actually is going to take you back to your international affairs roles. Yeah. And when you have had these types of international experiences, exposure, parents are your first generation in the US, a lot of these different types of thought processes, ways of looking at the world can have an impact on the way that you view the world or the way that you build your life, your business today. And I would love for you just to give us some insight as to how having parents who have immigrated to the US, having you yourself had lots of international exposure, how those experiences are really helping you help others today.
Yeah, that's a great question, Billy. I think, having the exposure on, being a translator, right, for my parents from a very young age, it gave me the opportunity and the skill set very early on to help navigate and understand people from very different backgrounds, right? So I was translating for my parents from Spanish to English, and I was translating for the rest of America, so to say, right, to help my parents understand different legal processes or, DMV, whatever the case was, right? And so I just, without realizing it at the time, right, was able to switch back and forth from Spanish to English very, very easily, understand, that people come from different backgrounds, right, be able to speak the language and communicate effectively, right, with people from different backgrounds. And so that just really gave me a huge appreciation, right? And I loved learning about other people and other customs in other countries. And so that all really came together when I started working in international education. And I was able to very easily communicate with students from all over the world and clients from all over the world. And it was very innate to me, right? I saw that other people around me would have a hard time trying to either translate or understand just nonverbal communication. And for me, it was very innate. And so I embraced it. I asked a lot of questions from, my students. I made it a point to study abroad when I was in college because I wanted to get to know the world. And I knew that, once I did, then this whole world that seems so large, right, coming from such a small community, just opened up. And so I caught the travel bug, I would say, when I was in college. And, it was really made it a point to get to know people on a deeper level. And it helped me connect in a way that I didn't expect at the time. I realized everybody shares certain qualities, right? No matter where you're from, no matter what language you speak, no matter what religion you practice. And it's the humanity, right? Where I was able to travel to other countries and sometimes not speak the language of that country, and they didn't understand my language, but still create very meaningful relationships with people. And so that, I think, now translates into everything else that I do. And Luke tells me this all the time. You just want to get to know people and understand them and help them. And I said, yes, this is innate. This is what my parents gifted to me in that experience of, being the child of an immigrant.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you sharing that. And it's great insight to have and a great reminder, and being able to take these early life lessons and then see how you can continue to serve and help other people today, and that positive impact. So thanks for sharing that. And you know what? We kind of have to get to the going long final 3 days. I can't believe we've gone through this conversation so fast. This goes like super duper fast. But the thing is, because you're our special guest, I never ask anyone, especially our special guests, the going long final 3, unless you tell me that you're ready for me to ask you the going long final 3. Are you ready?
Oh, I'm ready, Billy. Let's do it.
You were born ready. I knew you were going to say that. So here we go. We started with you, which is now today you're over in Austin, Texas. I'd like to bring it back this way to my new adopted home side of the pond. And I would love for you to share with me and the Going Long family, what is your favorite European city that you've either visited or is still on your bucket list to visit?
Ooh, I'm going to have to say 2 because one is too hard. One, Spain. That's where I studied abroad. So it has a very, very special place in my heart. So Barcelona is where I spent quite some time getting to know. And the other one is in Istanbul, Turkey. Oh. It just stole my heart. The warmth of the people, the deliciousness of the food, the architecture. So those are my top 2s.
Barcelona. So those are your top 2. So I'll have to ask you, but which one is your top one? And you can say Istanbul. You can be Istanbul. It's fun.
It has to be Barcelona. I just that was formative in terms of impacting my life.
All right, fantastic. So Barcelona, España. So I can relate to that, by the way, Daisy, because I find this to be a pretty awesome place myself as well. So we'll go ahead and include that in the show notes. And then, you know what, I want to share something with you that it's one of the things that I've actually learned a lot from being in contact with lots of very successful people. This is about question number 2. And, I'm very fortunate because with the podcast, you get a chance to meet a lot of successful people. I consider you to be someone who's very successful as well. And hopefully you agree with me. One of the qualities that you have also recognized from extremely successful people is that when they put a plan together, usually they, unlike most people, they put this plan together, they go out, they execute the plan, and then typically they get things right the very first time, which allows them to go much faster. Sorry about that. Don't worry, Daisy. It's just a joke. It's just a joke. Of course. You're like cool, calm, and collected. Daisy's like super cool, calm, and collected. She's like, I'm going to let him get out of this one. I don't know how he's going to get out of this one, but he's going to get out of it. No, it's just a joke. It's just a joke. I like to have fun here. So of course, people that are really successful, well, they may get things right the first time, but usually not. Usually really successful people get things wrong, probably 20 to 50 times more than most people.
Yeah.
But that was kind of a joke. This is reality. People that are very successful, whenever they make a really relevant mistake or have a relevant learning opportunity, however you want to call it, they do one thing very, very differently. And that is every single time that it's a relevant mistake, they stop, they learn from the mistake, and then they put different strategies, tactics, and actions in place to minimize the probability of that exact same thing happening again. Mm-hmm. Now, I don't want you to think about the mistake. I don't want you to dwell on that, but really think about it, but more, what was the lesson that you learned from the mistake that was made, and that lesson that you know that the Going Long family needs to hear today?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all about the learning opportunity, right? How can you learn and be better going forward? And for me, I remember very vividly the very first time that we were raising capital. I thought it was going to be a breeze, right? I thought it was going to be, the easiest thing in the world. We had put out so much content, and we had the podcast, and we were networking like crazy and getting to know investors. And I realized in going through the process that it's not just who you are and the message that you're putting out, it's all the back end processes and procedures that you have to make that transition go smoothly. And so it was very difficult for us to go through that first process, trying to track everything on Excel and call people manually, and it was very time consuming, and it was very challenging. And so immediately after that first raise, we said, we need an investor portal. We need to talk to our investors and see how can we streamline things so it's easier for them. We invested into a CRM. We invested a lot into putting in these procedures on the back end. And that was wonderful the second time around when we went through the process. But I don't know that it would have been as urgent to do that if we hadn't had so much difficulty going through it the very first time.
Well, and I appreciate you sharing that. And it is about the learning opportunities. When something happens once, what are the things that you want to be able to correct? And most importantly, actually go out and begin to correct them. So thank you for sharing that, Daisy. Really appreciate it. And we are already at the very last question. And the very last question is about helping us understand, fill our brains with more knowledge. What is the one book that you would recommend to the Going Long family today?
The one book that has made a huge difference for us on the business side of things is Traction. And I think this book applies whether you are investing or whether you have a business outside of real estate, right? It just really gives you an entrepreneurial operating system on what to focus on, what to put your time towards, and what's going to get you to your 10-year, 3-year, 1-year quarterly goals every single week. And so that's been crucial for us to be able to make progress and keep our mission very clear and top of mind.
Absolutely fantastic. So Traction, don't worry, everybody, just click a link. We're going to put it in the show notes. It'll be absolutely easy to get to. And wow, Daisy, the conversation has already come to a conclusion. I'm just thinking, like, from the very beginning, you're talking to us about being the daughter of immigrant parents, and you being able to recognize that you were focusing on getting, once you saw that, you went through life and you were helping to translate for them, and that helped you to give you in this innate ability to be able to serve, to be able to help, to also recognize that people look at things from different opportunities or different ways. And you even wanted to take that into university where you wanted to study criminology. You started there, but then you realized, you know what, maybe this is just a little bit too close for me. And so you pivoted, you made a change in your life, and you decided that you wanted to focus on the international aspect, and you were a study abroad programs, and you were a specialist in the international programs, and you were able to work in the consulate general for state of Kuwait. And then from there, you know what, you meet this guy, and he decides he wants to talk to you about real estate, something you didn't know much about at the time, but you learned a whole lot. And not only did that start to elevate the way that you were thinking, but it also took you to a new location, a location where you wanted to take more of the theoretical knowledge that you had, make it more practical, and from there also be able to gain many more results. And so as you've been there now for a little over 2.5 years, you're beginning to gain more traction. You're using a lot of the community building, the investor relations, the relationship building that you have to build your community for Make It Rain and Make It Rain Capital. Your podcast is absolutely amazing. You're impacting lives positively, both for millennials as well as first-time investors. And I know that the Going Long family is like, yeah, Billy, just ask her the question. So here's the idea. Like, help us understand, Daisy, what is the best way for the Going Long family to contact you, to learn more about what it is that you're doing and also what you're doing at Make It Rain Capital?
Yeah, the best way is going to our website, makeitraincapital.com. Nice and easy. And there you can find my calendar. You can find our contact information, LinkedIn, Instagram, all that good jazz. Being true millennials, we are very active on Instagram. So that's a great place to find us. But everything can be found on our website, makeitraincapital.com.
All right. Fantastic. So she made it very, very easy, everyone. MakeItRainCapital.com. Go over there, check it out. Their website is absolutely awesome. And yes, they do lots of really cool stories, and their Instagram is fantastic. So Daisy, I just want to thank you on behalf of the entire Going Long family. Thank you very much from the bottom of my heart for you deciding to invest your time with me and the Going Long family today. Thank you very, 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 very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Billy, and best wishes to the Going Long family. I think you've built an amazing community, and it's an honor for us to be part of your tribe and your community and to be able to share our experience with your listeners.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you very much. And Daisy, if you give me like 10 seconds, and I just want to wrap things up with the Going Long family and we'll be out of here. Listen, I mean, everybody, what more do you want? I mean, Daisy gave you very tactical, practical knowledge, tips, her own real life experience. Take this experience that she has shared with you today. Continue to share the episodes with other people. You've already downloaded it. Share with people. Have the conversations, the exact same things that Daisy was talking about before, that she does with Luke. They sit down, they talk about things, they have conversation. That's going to help you go from more of the theoretical knowledge into the practical application. And so I know that you're excellent at doing these kinds of things. So while you're downloading and sharing the episode, I'll be here preparing for the next conversation. So until then, go out and make it a great day. And thank you very much. Trust that you enjoyed today's conversation. And once again, today's conversation was sponsored by First Generation Capital Partners. If you're an accredited investor and want to find out more about how we're helping accredited investors to gain their personal freedom even faster, go to firstgencp.com/going long.